Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So today is a momentous occasion. It is, yes, a monthly Patreon deck. Once a month, patrons get to vote on a commander they'd like to see in an upcoming episode. The commander who gets most votes wins. And this time, this commander has been on the votes since, 2020 or so, maybe even earlier than that. And finally, in those polls, the winner of the monthly Patreon contest is 8.5 Tails. That's right. Finally, 8.5 Tails I've seen on the polls in the top 5 even a ton over the years. And finally getting the W and getting the deck tech. So again, congratulations to everyone out there who has backed this one and put it up. 8.5 Tails is a 2/2 Fox Cleric that costs white. Pay 1 and a white. Target permanent you control gains protection from white until end of turn. Pay 1. Target spell or permanent becomes white until end of turn. This is an incredibly unique commander and one that you can do some crazy off-the-wall things with. It's one that might be pretty unexpected for your opponents who are like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, I guess you can, protect things. Yes. But also, there are some really interesting manipulations that we can utilize with this kind of a commander that might be pretty unexpected out there. And there are some very powerful things that you can do with it. It's a very cool commander to build around. I'm so excited it finally won. If you are interested in this commander and this deck, make sure you check out that deck list link in the description below. With all that said, let's jump into the tactics. So let's start things off with tactic number 1, feeling safe. And feel safe we shall when we have very old and janky cards out that work so good with this commander. Circle Protection, white. Enchantment 4, 2 mana. Pay 1. Essentially prevent all damage from a white source. If Sarah deals damage to you once a turn, you pay 1 each time. It's very old language on this card, but this is the cheapest version, so that's what's being said. But basically, Oracle text, pay 1, prevent damage from a white source. And all of a sudden, you are like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, my commander can, again, for very easily, 1 mana, turn any permanent or spell white, and all of a sudden you can just say, oh, okay, for an extra mana, I get to prevent that. Absolutely fantastic. Next up, this is an interesting card and one that you need to be careful with when you play, but it can be a blowout card when used properly. Enchant for 2 mana. Each creature has protection from its colors. Yeah, that's quite fantastic because, again, you have a mono white deck, meaning that your creatures will have protection from white, which means, hey, again, pay 1, make any of your opponent's permanents or spells something that cannot hurt your creatures. Absolutely fantastic. But also, this does benefit your opponents potentially, so make sure you're keeping that in mind too. Although, actually, it can hurt your opponents as well if it's like an Auras-based deck. Just keep it all in mind. Moving on. Root Protection, white. A lot of weird cards in this deck, but they work really well. Pay a single white, prevent all damage from a white source. So again, yet another essentially extra way to essentially protect yourself and be able to say, you know what, that's white, those are not hurting me. I'm just going to stick back here. Next up, Story Circle, very similar. As enters battlefield, just like color. Probably going to be choosing white. Pay a white next time. May source your choice. Chose color, deal damage to this turn. Prevent that damage. So again, yet another easy way to essentially say, you know what? My commander can help make everything not a problem for me, essentially. And then moving on, we've got Archon of Absolution. This one actually has protection from white. So already just by, the actual, traits of our commander, being able to utilize that ability to make other things white that can really protect this. On top of that, though, creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. So a nice kind of mini Ghostly Prison type effect that can really add up throughout the game. Be like, yeah, are you sure you want to attack me? Spend that extra mana? I didn't think so. Next up, though, tactic number 2, Ultimate Shield. Full Metal Alchemist, anyone? No? Read? Okay. Anyways, Palace Guard, a 1/4 human soldier for 3 mana, can block any number of creatures. This is an incredibly simple, probably terrible card in many decks out there, but with this commander, it is really cool and really effective because, yeah, we're going to be, well, we'll get to that here in a bit, producing a lot of mana with this deck so that we can utilize that mana properly for our commander's abilities, including some of the abilities earlier that we talked about on some of the other cards, in ensuring that, you know what, if you swing at me, I might be able to just block everything I want to block with this and then protect it from white. and be like, oh, cool. Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to turn all your things white, protect it from white, and all of a sudden I have an infinite blocker here that can just block all your things. You're not getting through this wall. Moving on, Guardian of the Gateless, a 3/3 flying angel that, hey, look at this text, can block any number of creatures. So again, yet another way to say you're not getting through. And actually, even if you have flyers, you're not getting through this time too. On top of that, whenever it blocks, it gets ++1 until end of turn for each creature it's blocking. That is massive. That is huge. That is, again, another deterrent to say, don't swing at me with your army, because already I'm going to have something that can block them effectively and at least take out a creature or two, most likely. And also, hey, I'm going to give it protection and protect it from what I need to protect it from, and all of a sudden, you're in trouble. Next up, Iron Fist Crusher. This one is a morph creature, so it can be a surprise for opponents. And you can block any number of creatures. So again, yet another way to say you're not getting through this. And once I'm set up properly, it's not going to matter because I've also got a Pariah Shield. All damage that will be dealt to you is dealt to equipped creature instead, equip 3. So again, throwing this on one of our creatures and then giving it protection can be massive to say, sure, I don't have to block this time. Just come through me, hit me, whatever it is. All of a sudden, all of that damage is going to this creature, and that creature is going to get protection, so it's going to be fine, and I'm not going to be worried about it at all. Next up, Palisade Giant, a 2/7 giant soldier. Again, all damage dealt to us is dealt, or dealt to another permanent we control, is dealt to this instead. So again, giving it protection can say, you know what? Let's just make sure that this is okay. This is staying around, and our opponents have to get through, well, this first, and it's going to be very difficult for them to do so, and actually to order to get to us. And you might think we're done with it, but we're not done quite just yet, because Weathered Bodyguard's a 2/5 human soldier. Again, morph, so this can be a nice little surprise for our opponents. Whenever it's untapped, all combat damage we dealt to you by unblocked creatures is dealt to it instead. So again, as long as this just sticks around and stays untapped, all of a sudden our opponents are going to be like, oh, okay, I guess we need to, like, take this damage first. We need to take this out first. Oh no, we can't swing at you. We need to remove it if we don't remove it. But actually, if we try to remove it with a spell, then you might just give protection from that spell. I'm in trouble. Yeah, exactly. If we have these kind of just massive walls in play, we can protect ourselves and sit back and build up our resources to the point where we can start to dominate. But now let's move on to tactic number 3. Speaking of resources, one for the money, we have a lot of things that we need to build. We need to build up those resources so that we can utilize them effectively with our commander and our other activated abilities. First up, of course, there's Wayfarer's Bauble, pay 2 tap sacrifice, get a basic land to play tapped. Next up, Arcane Signet at 2 mana, taps for our color. You're going to be seeing a lot of these 2 mana, so let's just go through them quickly. Here we go. 2 mana, tap for a colorless, Fractured Power Stone. Marble Diamond, 2 mana, enter the battlefield, tap for a white. Mind Stone, 2 mana, taps for a colorless, pay 1, tap, sacrifice, draw a card. Prismatic Lens, also costs 2, taps for 1, or we can filter our mana if we really need to. Next up, Iron Crag, 2 mana, taps for 1. Also, it can become an equipment. Yeah, most likely we're just going to have this stick around as a mana rock, but later on in the game, maybe. Moving on, Thought Vessel. 2 mana, tap for 1. You have a maximum hand size, so that can come in handy. Then we've got Solemn Simulacrum, a 2/2 for 4. ETB, go get a basic land in a play tap. When this dies, we draw a card, so some extra value for us there. Next up, we've got some even bigger sources of mana for us in tack number 4, 2 for the show. First up, Everflowing Chalice. Pay 2, taps for 1, pay 4, taps for 2, etc., etc. So yeah, a very flexible, very efficient mana rock. Speaking of efficient, though, Victory Chimes. This one is huge for this deck. Cost 3, taps for 1, or technically a player of your choice adds 1, so you could just, like, make a deal if you really want to. You might not be doing that, though, with this commander. That being said, it says during each other player's untap step, you're going to be untapping it. So essentially, yeah, every single turn, you get a mana, which, again, you can dump into your commander's abilities to really utilize them very effectively. Speaking of effective and efficient, Worn Power Stone costs 3, enters battlefield tap, but this one does tap for 2, so it's very efficient. Hedron Archive, again, 4 mana, taps for 2. We can also pay 2, tap, and sacrifice to draw 2 cards to replace it. Ichor Elixir says a lot of things about the player and die. Ignore that. What we care about is this cost 4, taps for 2. So again, very efficient for us. We also have Sisay's Ring, 4, taps for 2. And we also have our Golem's Eye, 4, taps for 2. Stonespeaker Crystal, slightly better because it has the exact same thing, but also pay 2, tap, sacrifice. Exile any of our players' graveyards, draw a card. So this can be a huge, huge deterrent for our opponents with certain strategies, or just a big blowout against those strategies like Reanimation, etc. Also, we have Keeper of the Accord, a really cool card, 3/4 human soldier for 4 mana. Beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more creatures than us, we get a soldier. Lovely. On top of that, though, at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if they have more lands than us, we go get a plains on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Here's the thing. We're in mono white. We don't have access to green. They're going to land ramp better than us. So now this helps us catch up in that aspect. And again, with the amount of ramp that we we can get to an absurd amount of mana. Speaking of which, Dreamstone Hadron, basically a really big Mind Stone. Cost 6, taps for 3, pay 3 tap sacrifice, draw 3, so that can be a big boost for us. But now let's move on to tactic number 5. Like I mentioned, again, we are building up those resources for our commander's abilities and the other abilities that we've talked about too. But also we can utilize those resources in some very big splashy ways to take over the game, like Horn of Valhalla. This is an artifact equipment, and we'll get through what it does after we talk about its sorcery adventure side. X, white, white, create X, 1/1 soldier creature tokens. Again, we basically going to say, yeah, I built up all this mana to get defensive with my commander, but now, you know what? It's time to just go all in with this, dump a ton of mana into this, get like 15 plus soldiers out, and all of a sudden, I have a giant army out of nowhere. And also, speaking out of nowhere, hey, let's pay 3 and equip this to one of our creatures, maybe even our commander. Equip creature gets ++1 for each creature you control. That can be an absolutely massive amount. Next up, March to the Canonize. An enchantment for X, white, white. Enters the battlefield. Make X, 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink. So make a bunch of lifelinkers. Lovely. On top of that, begin your upkeep of your devotion to white and black is 7 or greater. Create a 4/3 white and black vampire demon creature token with flying. Yeah, we're playing a mono white deck. Chances are we're going to be able to get our devotion up to that amount to get some extra tokens into play. Moving on. Defenders of Humanity, speaking of extra tokens, X, 2 and a white, enters the battlefield, create X, 2/2, white Astartes warrior creature tokens with vigilance, pay the exact same amount, and all of a sudden we can exile it to do the exact same thing, activating during, if you control no creatures only during your turn. So basically this is a good kind of, hey, things didn't go well out there, right? We had that army, it's gone, maybe someone wrathed the board, maybe we wrathed the board, and you know what? Let's just replay that. Let's just reset that, maybe even more, actually, because we might have even more mana, so being able to say, yeah, let's just do that again. Run it back. Next up, though, White Sun Zenith. Out of nowhere, this can be absolutely huge. Instant speed, X, white, white, white. Create X, 2/2, white cat creature tokens. Shuffle into Storm's library so you can cast this one more than once. Then we've got Decree of Justice, XX, 2, white, white. So quite the cost there, but hey, the payoff for this is massive. X, 4/4, white on controls with flying, being able to just make a massive, evasive, huge flying angel army out of nowhere. Lovely. Speaking of nowhere, though, could also cycle away if you need to. And when you do cycle it away, you can pay X and make X 1/1 white soldiers. So again, instant speed, draw a card too. What's not to love about that? Right before your turn to surprise your opponents with this army that just came out of nowhere. But speaking of coming out of nowhere, how about tactic number 6, massive threats? Because again, yeah, we worked really hard, right? We built up this massive amount of mana. Let's use it, not just for our commander, but for massive threats like Myojo to Blooming Dawn. I love this card. 4/6 Spirit for 8 mana, enters the battlefield, indestructible counter on if we cast from our hand. So having a 4/6 indestructible for 8 mana, that's not all that great. That being said, obviously I can help out in a lot of ways, but still what we can do with that indestructible counter is remove it. When we do, we get a 1/1 Spirit for each permanent we control. That can be an absurd amount. I mean, even just playing this, right, you're probably going to have at least like 10 plus permanents when you play this. That being said, hey, if you cast one of those X spells I just talked about, all of a sudden, it's like, oh yeah, I got like 20 soldiers in play too. Okay, cool, add that up. Oh, okay, cool, remove this. Make 30 creatures out of nowhere. Dominate your opponents with something like this. Speaking of domination, how about some Eldrazi? A very budget-friendly one with the Mongoose Crusher. 8/8 Eldrazi for 8 mana. Annihilator 2. So when it attacks that unfortunate opponent has to sacrifice 2 permanents. And guess what? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm forced to attack. Oh, darn. It's got to attack each combat if able. Oh, I'm very sorry, opponents. Also, keep in mind, again, our commander is very good at protecting our creatures, so it can maybe even help get them through in combat, too. Next up, Artisan of Kozilek. Again, we've got the mana to get these big guys out. Might as well play it. Artisan of Kozilek, a 10/9 Eldrazi for 9 mana. When you cast it, reanimate a creature out of your graveyard. That can be huge. Also, of course, Annihilator 2, because it's a mean Eldrazi. Moving on, Hand of Emrakul. Of course, another mean Eldrazi. 9 mana, 7/7. Annihilator 1. So slightly less mean, but still quite mean. Speaking of mean, though, Blazing Archon. I love this card. Well, for me, when I play it. Not for when my opponents play it. A 5/6 flyer for 8 mana. Sorry, 9 mana. So yeah, that's not typically worth it, but it is when you add the text, creatures can't attack you. Yeah, the base level of a Magic game typically is players attacking each other, and that's how you win. And now we're saying, you can't do that. And until you deal with this, you probably can't take me out. So again, all those wall creatures we talked about earlier, like the ones that can just block everything, those are great. This one just says, hey, also, you're just never coming at me until you deal with this. Oh, by the way, I've got a commander that can make it so it's really difficult for you to ever deal with this. Absolutely love it. Speaking of love, hey, Stormherd, I love you. X, oh, Pegasus. I almost forgot. I was going to say birds. No, it's Pegasus. They're little horses with wings. There we go. Creature tokens with flying or X is your life total. So, yeah, let's say you're at 40. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, okay, cool. 41-1 flyers. Good luck, opponents. Could be even more, though. Obviously, you've got some lifelink in the deck as well, like I talked about Earth Those Vampires. So, could be even more. Have fun. But now let's move on to tactic number 7, Imminent Destruction, because you know what? Our commander can already mess with our opponents quite a bit, but let's mess with him even more. How about Dauntless Dismantler? Artifacts our opponents control into the battlefield tap, so we can slow them down quite a bit. Also, by the way, pay XX and a white, sacrifice this, destroy each artifact with mana value X. This can really slow them down and knock out a lot of their permanents. Glare of Heresy is next. 2 mana sorcery, exile target white permanent. Very, very specific, but works very well with this commander that can again say, oh, that's white. Cool. Take it out. Next up, Marshaku. This one can actually be a great X spell for us where we can dump a lot of mana into it. It's very flexible. Or we can do a little bit less if we don't want to destroy everything. Create X 1/1 white soul to creature tokens. If X is 5 or more, destroy other creatures. So this can be a good finisher for us to be like, oh, let's wipe the board, also make a massive army. Or just, hey, let's make a couple of tokens. Don't worry about wiping the board just yet. Flexible. Next up, Oblation. Speaking of flexible, basically makes someone shuffle a non-land permanent back into their library. They get to draw 2 cards. So this can actually be for us if we're like, hey, we need to draw some cards. That little token right there that's ours, let's just shuffle that in. Oh, no, I lost my token. Drew 2 cards. Or, hey, that player has, like, Ulamog out there. Let's get rid of that. Yeah, being able to flexibly either get rid of something or give yourself some cards that can be huge. Next up, Crush Contraband, exile an artifact, exile enchantment. What's not to love about that? Space Marine Devastator, yet another card that we can utilize our massive amount of resources for. A 3/3 as far as Warrior Squad too. So basically, you can pay extra for that squad. Every single time you do, you're getting an extra one. When it enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. So yeah, make an army essentially, while also just obliterating your opponent's boards. Speaking of obliteration, Cleansing Nova, very flexible. Choose 1 to our creatures. All artifacts and enchantments depend situation. Choose which one's better for you. Pentarch Paladin, a 3/3 flanking, enters the battlefield as a color. White. Pay white, tap, destroy target permanent of the chosen color, because again, our commander can essentially say, that's white, take it out. So yeah, this is a great pairing. And also flanking, weird. Don't worry about that. So, Austere Command is a really cool card as well. Very flexible. Choose 2. Artifacts, enchantments, small creatures, big creatures, whatever you need to get rid of it and destroy all those things. But now let's move on to tactic number 8, dig deep, because yeah, we kind of need to dig deep to get to all these amazing cards. Let's do that. The card like cut a deal. Look, we're the friendly player, all right? We're helping everyone out. You're welcome. 3 mana, everyone else draws a card, and then we draw a card for each opponent who drew a card this way. So hey, I'm helping you all while also drawing 3 cards myself. Thank you. Next up, Mentor the Meek. Keep all the cards for yourself. When another creature enters the battlefield with power 2 or less under your control, pay 1, draw a card. So yeah, again, we've got a lot of ways to make a lot of tiny creatures, and just a lot of tiny creatures, including our commander too. So all of a sudden, draw a lot of cards with something like this. Next up, Pile of Gladriel. This is actually a mana rock. Yeah, we've already got a lot of those, but what's another one, right? 3 mana. It can tap for 1 mana of any color, but it does help us out in multiple ways. You draw a card while you have no cards in hand, draw 2 cards instead, so that can be very helpful for us, doubling up that. Also, hey, if we're really low on life, we gain twice as much life as well. Moving on, Rumor Gatherer. 2/1 Elf Wizard. When another creature in his battlefield under control, scry 1. Second time each turn, you get to draw a card instead. Yeah, again, we've got so many ways to make so many creatures. We're going to be scrying a lot with this and also drawing a lot with that too. Keep in mind, it is on every single turn, right? So, hey, if it's on your opponent's turns, that's lovely as well. Next up, Secret Rendezvous. We're going to be best buds with that player over there, okay? 3 mana, draw 3. You also get to draw 3. You're welcome. You can really politic with a card like this. 3 mana is not a lot for drawing 3 cards, obviously. And it's like, hey, you know what? I'm doing you a favor. You know what? Help me out here, too. Next up, speaking of help out, Temples Under Attack can also be like that. You and target opponent each draw 2 cards, so slightly 1 less, but instant speed. Also, though, a good protection spell. Creatures you control get indestructible out of turn is the other option. So depending on if you want to save yourself or, just be a friendly partner with someone else. Be like, hey, you know what? Let's just team up. You draw some cards, I draw some cards. Let's take out our opponents, and then, yeah, we'll just fight each other at the end. Alms Collector, you're probably going to be fighting everyone with, though. A 3/4 flash, Cat Cleric. If an opponent would draw 2 or more cards, instead, you and that player each draw a card. So, share with me. You're drawing too many cards. Just let me have those. And, of course, flashing this in to surprise your opponents is quite fun, at least for you. Next up, Slate of Ancestry. Take advantage of all the creatures that you have. Again, you're going to be making a ton. Pay 4, tap, discard your hand, draw a card for each creature you control. That can be an absurd amount. And, again, they just be able to go wide and be like, oh, I've already got a threatening board. Let me draw 15 cards now. Thank you. Speaking of drawing cards, Symmetry Matrix. This one is very similar to a card we mentioned earlier, but slightly different. Whenever a creature with power equal to its toughness enters battle under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card. So being able to say, oh yeah, I got at least like 1/1 tokens, 2/2 tokens, whatever they are, pay 1, draw an extra card. Similar to Mentor the Meek, but slightly different, but still very, 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 very good. Speaking of good though, Lore's Seeker Stone. Again, we've got a lot of mana. Might as well get a big, powerful artifact like this out. Pay 3, tap, draw 3 cards. It costs 1 more to activate for each card in our hand. So again, if we have no cards in our hand, great. Just 3 mana to draw 3 cards. That is huge. If we have a little more, that's okay. Again, we've got the mana to actually pay for it. Sandstorm Oracle can be a huge boon for us, though. 4/4 Flying Sphinx enters the battlefield, choose an opponent. They've got more hands than you, more cards in their hand than you. There we go. Draw cards equal difference. So actually, this can be kind of a fun play for like, oh hey, draw some cards, and then later on you're like, I'll take advantage of all those cards you have in your hand now. I will draw extra. Thank you. But now that we've talked about every single non-land card in this deck, let's quickly go through some great lands in tactic number 9. Archivaraska, a great land. It can help us draw. Once we got the City's Blessing, which is very easy to get, especially a deck that can go very wide like this one, pay 5 tap, draw a card. Or we can share. Hey, Gyroid Sanitarium, pay 2 tap, every single player loots. You're welcome, everyone, and I'm going to be digging down deeper for my great cards. Or how about Seagate Wreckage? This one can tap for 8 colors, or pay 2 and 8 colors, tap, draw a card, only if you've got no cards in hand. So again, a kind of panic button for us when we're like, oh, we're out. Well, my little land can actually help me out. It's not really taking up a spot in your deck. But now as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know your thoughts are on this deck. If you are interested in this deck, again, very budget friendly, just $20.50 according to Moxfield, though that doesn't include basics or the cost of shipping. But yeah, very, very budget friendly still. Make sure you check out that Decklist link in the description below. And again, congratulations, 8.5 Tails, on your victory. Hope that you enjoyed the episode, everyone. And of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.